Welcome to The Big Picture, a show that takes a deep dive into the political landscape of not only America, but right here in our own backyard of Illinois.
It's showtime, folks.
The Big Picture is on WCPT 820. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath.
Okay, everybody, welcome. Happy Saturday. Wow. We have a lot to talk about. The president went online this morning and attacked Chicago, said we are about to learn what it means, why they call it the War Department. And he showed a picture of himself dressed up like, I don't know, like some warrior, and helicopters flying over Lake Michigan, promising, war here in Chicago. Look, we'll get to that throughout this show. It's just so appalling. But is there anyone in his administration you admire? Anyone? That question came to me, yesterday morning. I was walking my dog. It was just before sunrise. It was the time of day when the sunlight hasn't yet touched the ground, but gives the upper floors of buildings this soft glow. I love that time of day, and it generally puts me in a good mood. But the question nagged at me. Is it possible that the highest levels of government in the United States consist entirely of people who are either fools or crooks or characters that are utterly compromised? So you know what? I went home and I pulled out a list of cabinet members. Shall we? Let's do this. HHS Secretary Bobby Kennedy. Oof. Well, he spent time this week lying to Congress. His dishonest and incompetent leadership will result in parents watching their children die of preventable diseases. Yeah, no, not in the admirable list. How about Attorney General Pam Bondi? She told us the Epstein files were on her desk and that she would release them soon. She lied. She's abused her office, weaponized it, lost most of the talented lawyers, wasted taxpayer resources on frivolous and political prosecutions, and she's perverted justice. Yeah, not her. How about EPA Secretary Lee Zeldin? He moved to close the agency's scientific research divisions. He argues that, allowing pollution will help energy production, but that just means it will boost oil company profits. And that's not working out so well anyway. He rolled back air pollution standards. He ignored PFAS. Those are forever chemicals, those limits in our drinking water. He gave away the legal basis for regulating climate change and greenhouse gases. Yeah, not him. Tulsi Gabbard at DNI, please. Russ Vaught at OMB, the actual devil. Linda McMahon at Education. She promised Al would be in every classroom to help students. Later, someone whispered to her that it wasn't actually Al, but AI. Education, right? Never mind. She fired almost everybody to effectively shutter the department. Pete Hegseth over at Defense. Besides being a white nationalist thug, he's an idiot who put highly secret battle plans on public chat and then invited, a reporter he didn't know to the conversation. He should be in jail. Oh, but there's Pam Bondi who won't put him there, right? No, they can't commit crimes. This week he bombed a boat. How did he not know that was illegal? Because one of the first things he did was to fire the lawyers who might have told him. Now he's busy training our troops to invade our city, my city. You got to be kidding me. Kristi Noem at Homeland Security shot her dog. Now she's putting children on planes at 2 a.m. to sneak them out of the country. To a person. These leaders of our government are unfit for the work. Unfit, not just because, like Linda McMahon, they really haven't a clue what they're doing, but unfit because they lack the character for leadership in a great nation. Let's take a little bit of a longer look at Commerce Chief Howard Lutnick, because he is not an idiot. And yet he is as unfit for the job as the rest of this bunch. His financial services firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, they paid more than $6 million in penalties just last year for making misleading statements to investors. Naturally, that qualified him in Trump's mind to lead the Commerce Department, right? And speaking of character references, guess who's, his biggest champion? Elon Musk. This is a man who spent his life, as a capitalist, right? But for Trump, he's willing to forget all that. As Commerce Secretary, he's been the point man for strong arming American companies. Remember, in our capitalist system, the government doesn't own businesses. That's the private sector that takes those risks, that, can sometimes reap the rewards. But in Trump's economy, well, the government has taken ownership stakes in Intel and U.S. Steel, and Lutnick now wants them to own defense contractors too. Yeah, so much for free enterprise. Oh, and then there's our data. The Bureau of Economic Analysis is part of the Commerce Department. That agency, it develops really important data sets that are used to support both fiscal and monetary policy. The department produces, indicators, important ones. For example, it calculates the GDP. That's a pretty big and important number. When Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Lutnick cheered. He said the independence of the agency was nonsense. Remember that when we start getting numbers from Lutnick about the GDP. The independence of the agency is nonsense. That's what he said. And you know what else? The National Weather Service is part of the Commerce Department. Lutnick slashed it. Same with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Never mind that accurate forecasts are important for American businesses as diverse as, agriculture and aviation. He gutted them to make room for private entities to make a killing selling us our own data. And guess what? So it wouldn't be able to warn anyone about climate change. 2 weeks ago, Lutnick told us that Japan would be making a $550 billion investment in the U.S. in a week. Yeah, well, this week arrived and Forbes reported the deal was in limbo. These guys, you can't make it up. Lutnick was the guy who was going to make 100 trade deals in 100 days. He made 2. And he's been Trump's lead tariff salesman. Instead of helping American businesses, he's joining Trump and telling them to eat those extra taxes. None of this helps our country. Then there's this. And this is what really got me. His old firm is now run by his sons. And what are they up to? They are buying the rights to collect tariff refunds when the Supreme Court rules that Trump never had the authority to impose them in the first place. Yep. According to Wired and repeated in Talking Points memo, the firm is paying 20 to 30 cents on the dollar for tariff refunds. They stand to make a huge killing. I mean, somewhere between tripling and quadrupling their investment. How big an investment? We don't actually know. But Trump says we've collected trillions in tariff taxes. That is, a lie. Most people think it's closer to 30 billion. But that's a lot of room for the kids of the man in charge of the tariff scheme to profit from the tariff scheme. Right? That sort of thing used to be a problem. Not anymore. In Donald Trump's America, if you can enrich yourself at someone else's expense, if you can hurt someone but do it on TV, if you're willing to help turn the coercive power of America's government against political adversaries and American citizens, then hey, you can be in the cabinet. I really didn't have to look. I looked. This is what I found. Just disgusting, unfit to serve a great nation. And they're doing a terrible job. But I didn't have to look because that last cabinet meeting should have told me everything I needed to know. I mean, you remember that meeting? It was set up not as a cabinet meeting where serious people talk about how the government can meet our challenges. It was a reality TV show where the contestants, those cabinet members, competed for the prize. Who can spend the most time kissing Donald Trump's ass in front of the cameras? It's hard to imagine that taxpayers have to foot the hefty salaries of officials to spend hours drafting and memorizing their lines for that farce. Fools. People helplessly in over their heads, liars, sadists, and folks like Lutnick who don't have a problem breaking the global economy so long as they make a profit. That's what passes for the government of this once proud nation. And the leader of it all, the thug in chief, the felon, this morning posted that he was going to bring war to Chicago. This is a man who says, I want a Nobel Peace Prize. And I guess if he can't have a Nobel Peace Prize, he's going to go blow up boats in international waters, claim there are no restraints on his use of power, on his coercive power. And he thinks we are all going to bow down in fear. Well, he doesn't understand America for sure. And we are going to have a great show talking about that. When we come back, look, I caught up with my friend, Congressman Chuy Garcia yesterday. As Donald Trump, as he's threatening to send troops into Chicago, Congressman Garcia and I spoke about Congress, the attack on immigrants and the Latino community here, and what people are doing to be ready. Chuy talked about the cruelty of this administration and the deeply dishonest portrayal of hardworking immigrant communities where, people just want to contribute to this country and have a shot at the American dream. That conversation is coming up right after a short break. Don't go away.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. There's a lot of talk about ICE coming to Chicago. I'm terrified about that, but there's no one I'd rather talk to about that, and frankly, about what's going on in Congress right now than my old friend, Representative Chuy Garcia. He has, proudly led the folks in the 4th Congressional District of Illinois in Washington since 2019. He's had a long career in politics and out of politics, working in his community in Chicago, helping people. He has been a tough fighter for immigrants and working class Chicagoans through his entire career. And it's made a huge difference in people's lives. Anyway, as I said, there's no one I would rather talk to about this moment than Chuy. Hi there.
It's great to join you, Edwin. Always a pleasure, and thank you for having me on your program.
No, it's important that people hear from you at this moment. Hey, before we get to what's actually going on in Chicago, how about a quick update on the budget? Where are we right now? I understand Republicans need some Democratic help for a change. Talk about that.
Well, they do if they know what's in the best interest for the country. But so far, the situation doesn't look very promising in terms of a bipartisan effort to pass a budget. For example, the House has passed 3 bills so far: defense, energy and water, and military construction and VA. But there are 12 bills that need to be passed, and they get harder to pass as well. So the situation is one where there is not, where there aren't meetings taking place between Democratic and Republican members. The chair of the Appropriations Committee is a Republican, Representative Cole, who's one of the more reasonable ones in the Republican caucus. But this is not a good sign. And, of course, both House and Senate Democratic leaders Jeffries and Schumer put out a letter this past Tuesday announcing their intention to stand strong in the face of Republican coercion of government funding. In the letter, they affirm that the only way to appropriate is in a bipartisan manner, but reject the move where Republicans go at it alone and then seek to blame Democrats for a showdown if they don't acquiesce. Speaker Johnson has said that he doesn't want a shutdown, and that he and Jeffries have had minor conversations about keeping the government open past September 30th. But you also, and of course the White House wants a continuing resolution into the first quarter of 2026. And the Appropriations Chair, Tom Cole, wants a continuing resolution until November. But it is not a good situation, especially when you factor in the fact that in late August, the White House informed Congress of its plan to unilaterally cancel almost $5 billion in previously appropriated foreign aid funding using a rare budget move called a pocket rescission. Pocket rescission occurs when there's not enough time to honor Congress's 45-day window to review a rescissions package before the end of the fiscal year. Obviously, this is intentional to create this situation. It's in bad faith. And once again, we see the Trump administration going back and undoing funding that Congress has already appropriated. So that's the situation that we are facing. And of course, the possibility of a shutdown remains a real possibility. So we don't know what's going to happen, again, attributable to the hyper partisanship in Washington and the draconian measures of the Trump administration.
Yeah. Thank you for that update. Look, the last time Congress passed the CR, Democrats helped pass it, but it wasn't clean. It included language that said a day isn't a day for the purposes of Donald Trump getting to declare an emergency. And that's allowed him to impose the tariffs and to do all kinds of emergency things he didn't really have the power to do. Are Democrats ready to say, we aren't playing your game, we don't trust you, there is no good faith? You either take crap like that out of and do this cleanly and you put money back into healthcare, or you're on your own, buddy?
I think Democrats are much more resolved to make sure that we don't go along with things that are going to hurt the country and hurt our economy. The jobs report that came out today suggests that indicates that the economy is stagnant, that it's being damaged by the Trump measures, including the tariffs. And of course, as you have read, a judge has ruled, a court has ruled that the tariffs have been done in violation of the law. Obviously, the case is being appealed to the Supreme Court, who will chime in, of course, on this subject. But this week jobs report for the month of August is the second one, and it comes after the firing of the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so further undermining credibility in the future forecasting of economic indicators across the country. So let's not forget that Trump, inherited a pretty vibrant economic situation, and the policies that have been implemented are hurting the economy and causing lots of problems and potentially moving us closer to a recession.
Yeah, I mean, and the revised numbers for June, based on the ad data, so that they lost 13,000 jobs that month. That would be the first net monthly loss of jobs since the pandemic began. Yes. The last time this guy was president. I don't know why anybody thinks he's good for the economy, Chewy. What he's doing, I mean, you and your fellow Democrats passed unbelievably transformative laws that were going to be, bring jobs to America, build a clean energy economy. And these were good union jobs coming up all over the country. And these guys have just undone all of that for what? To give themselves tax breaks?
The bipartisan infrastructure law was badly needed. It happened under the Biden administration. It was bipartisan, although most Republicans in the House voted against it, but thank God for some Republicans in the Senate. And it invested in significant infrastructure projects, in rebuilding rusting, dangerous bridges, and removing lead piping that is so hurtful to children in particular. in our rail infrastructure, in our water infrastructure, in our airports, aviation infrastructures of O'Hare and Midway as well. This was the most significant investment in infrastructure since the New Deal when Franklin Roosevelt was president. And then the green investments in the Inflation Reduction Act, kind of a misnomer of that bill, are also unprecedented. It's the biggest investment to fight climate change, sustainable energy into the future, on and on. And those are all being clawed back continuously by Republicans. And that's just hurting us because we continue to lag behind countries in Europe, in Japan, in China, where they're making significant investments in these things. And, you know, in America, we just don't have high-speed rail as one example of the type of infrastructure where we're way behind in.
I mean, and your Republican colleagues who voted against this stuff, that didn't stop them, any of them, from showing up at the ribbon cuttings when the project started. It's really, we got to just call them out.
Those hypocrites. I mean, they were out there taking credit, extolling all of the good that is coming from those projects, but they voted against it and they criticized it. Yet they were out there, with their shovels, with their scissors, cutting ribbons and taking credit. So
just propulsive. Well, I'm glad to hear that the party is united and will stand strong to not get steamrolled and to fight tough and make the Republicans own their own mess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, this morning, I understand that our senators, Durbin and Duckworth, went out to Great Lakes Naval Training Center where Trump sent the military and guard forces on ice to prepare for their, what Trump would say is their triumphant entry into the city, Roman emperor that he wants to be. What do you know about that?
What I have learned, and I watched some video postings where Senator Durbin and Duckworth, along with Congressman Brad Schneider, my colleague, went out there. It seems to have been a surprise visit because when the Department of Homeland Security personnel saw them arriving and walking towards them to have a conversation, to ask questions about the staging of DHS personnel, ICE, and perhaps other federal agents, what did they do? They ran away as if they had been caught doing something wrong, probably because they are doing something wrong, something that they don't want to talk about, something that is shameful and that needs to continue to be secretive. So they ran away. They left their materials on a table where they were in order to avoid having a conversation with 2 U.S. senators and a member of Congress and a mayor of North Chicago who was there. What we learned from the remarks of Senator Duckworth and Durbin is that the naval personnel shared that the facilities at the naval base will only be used as an office space, that it would not be used for detention of people that are apprehended, seemingly immigrants, that there are no munitions being stored there, and that the Marine Corps Reserve personnel has not been activated as it relates to the naval base. So that is about as much as we know, thanks to the visit and the initiative taken by our 2 senators and, of course, Brad Schneider as well. Perhaps we'll learn a little bit more, but that's what we know as of today.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's such a weird combination, Chewy, of an administration that is doing actual harm to people, but at the same time is also doing stuff just to create some kind of TV showish spectacle. And I mean, it sounds like, I have no doubt they're going to come here and cause enormous problems. But there's also, they want to do this for TV, and maybe they're not going to use that naval base in the way they pretended they were a week ago.
Without a doubt. Look, it's very clear to me that the sending of federal agents here who have been on the streets of Chicago and other localities, other suburban areas in the metro region, pulling people over, interrogating people with masks on, covering up their identity, sometimes being very aggressive and just nabbing people, kidnapping people off the street, taking them from work, taking them from around schools and clinics. This is unprecedented. This has never happened before. And this latest staging, in my opinion, is coinciding. I think it's planned. It's intended to be that way ahead of one of the largest Mexican Independence Day celebrations that happens in Chicago, given the large population of Mexican Americans. So let's not forget that in his first campaign for the presidency in 2015, he was targeting Mexicans. So obviously the gathering of people for all kinds of celebrations in different settings, from schools to gatherings in parks and other public places, is meant to coincide. What I think Trump and Stephen Miller and Tom Homan would like is, as young people are, cruising throughout Chicago and waving flags and, demonstrating their pride and celebrating history and culture and all the contributions that we make to this country, that they can create clashes so that cameras are there, so that these clashes can be recorded with Mexican flags in the background to demonstrate, right, that there is disorder, that things are out of control, that there's violence. But let's recall or not forget that none of this would be happening if they weren't here, because people are fearful, people are angry, people feel that this is all very hypocritical, and that it's been demonstrated time and time again that the people that are being apprehended are not the worst of the worst. They're not the criminals. They're not the dangerous people. They're not the gang members. They're people who basically work. Many of them come from mixed status families. They have spouses. They have children who are U.S. citizens. Some of them are pursuing their legal residency. And when they show up for hearings, when they show up for, to report to immigration authorities, they're being apprehended and they're being sent away to faraway places without the ability to even call their loved ones to let them know what has transpired, without having the opportunity to talk to their lawyers, and then they're deported. So the what has been in practice before, which is due process for cases that are pending before immigration authorities, has been done away with. And this arbitrariness is happening on a regular basis. And one might also, if I can add, sorry I went on a bit long, in my opinion, the other reason that this is happening now, Edwin, is because it's a convenient distraction for Trump and his inner circle. Why? Because Congress members and people across the country, across the partisan divide, want to see the release of the entire Epstein files. We want to know who's been covering up the horrendous crimes against children and young women, because California is fighting back against the illegal and violative of the Voting Rights Act that's occurred in the state of Texas. People are rejecting the militarization of the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and of course, the mass mobilizations that we saw once again on Labor Day last Monday, and then the No Kings March and the hands-off rallies that have occurred. And Chicago was a leader in that regard with 65,000 people at the No Kings March. And, let's also not forget that Chicago this year marked its 40th anniversary when it was declared a welcoming sanctuary city for immigrants back when Harold Washington was mayor of the city of Chicago. And I think that's around the same time that, by the way, the D.C. mayor also declared Washington, D.C. a sanctuary city. So we have a special place in this administration's mind or their mindset. And let's not forget that Chicago stands up for women's reproductive rights, and Chicago protects and defends the rights of the LGBTQ community, and proudly so. And you and I were in the city council when we passed the Human Rights Act. In Chicago, a leader in that regard. So those are all of our sins, actually good deeds that are about protecting people, and especially minorities, in the city of Chicago.
Well, there's a lot. You said a lot there. And I guess, Chewy, are there people who listen to this show online? They have no connection to Chicago. They're all over the country. And I wonder, the celebrations of Mexican Independence Day, which anybody who lives in this city sees every year and loves every year. Let's take a minute and just talk about, tell people what that's like, how the joy. You talked about people out cruising. I mean, what is that experience that people, so when they see it, they know what it is and they can help, enjoy it like for what it is?
We have, thousands of people who have now created a tradition where they cruise around and they play music. They wave flags, and they live it up. And it's happening all over Chicago, from Southeast Chicago, Chicago's first Latino community, going back to the beginning of the 20th century, and then of course expanding throughout the Southwest Side and the Northwest Side, and of course in downtown Chicago. It's a festive celebration. I think it was brought on during the COVID days when people just felt like, they had been locked up for so long that they wanted to celebrate. So it became an expression, right, of the fact that we were alive, that we were healthy, and that we have a future, that we survived the pandemic. So that's one expression, and that's the one I'm most concerned about, that I think could be used to provoke young people, especially if you have masked agents confronting them. But two, the other pieces that get lost is all of the celebration of civic pride that's organized in Chicago public schools, in churches, in public plazas, all over Chicagoland, where there are Mexican communities and Central and South American communities as well, because September 15th and September 16th, they commemorate their nation's Independence Days as well, and it's a big celebration. But it's really very family-oriented. It is celebrating history. It's celebrating culture and music and cuisine, lots of cuisine. Mm-hmm. People are just in a very festive mood. People are dressed in typical dresses from the various regions of Mexico. You hear music, you see dance performances taking place. But again, people gather to celebrate family, to celebrate hard work, to remember those immigrants who left their families to come to America in search of a better life, in search of the American dream. Now we're going to have federal agents occupying Chicago and potentially National Guard troops doing the same, and it all coincides with this. So people are angry, people are sad, and people feel that they're being singled out, and that it has everything to do with their ethnicity, with their national origin, and how they look.
I am furious, Chewy. Chicago, for those of you who don't know this great city, look, it's about a third white, a third black, a third Latino. Yes. That makes it remarkable. Beautiful. And every group that's here is contributing to make it a great city. And it won't be the same city, if that changes. It is a fabulous mix of Americans and people who love it here. And Donald Trump doesn't like that. He just doesn't. He wants to, erase a big chunk of our city. And we're not going to let him. Not. So, Chewy, how do we help? How do we help each other in this time?
I think we need to be vigilant and raise awareness about what remains people's rights. That is the constitutional protections against being profiled, against being anonymously interrogated by masked agents.
Kidnapped.
Who cover up their names, who cover up their faces, who won't say who they are, and who we've seen are just profiling people based on how they look or where they are in communities across Chicago. There are strong campaigns going on all over the region, not just in Chicago, but in many suburban communities, and many mayors and elected officials have stepped up their efforts, along with nonprofit organizations, with church organizations, to raise people's awareness about their rights, and that they don't have to answer questions unless people identify themselves, unless so-called authorities identify themselves. We also have a great concern that as federal agents are operating in this manner, that fringe groups will get into the act here and begin to act to impersonate federal agents because they're masked and they are covering up their identities, and that this can lead to violence, and that this can lead to very bad things happening to people simply based on their appearance, or because they may be speaking in Spanish, or because they may speak with an accent as well. So we're very concerned about, the Proud Boys, about other white supremacists, xenophobic groups operating in this climate. And that's why we're pushing legislation in Washington to make federal agents identify themselves, just as Chicago police officers and suburban police officers are required to do so. They patrol when they enforce laws in other places as well, and that should be the case because they're working at the service of civilians and taxpayers, and having them operate in this very shady and aggressive manner is as un-American as one can get. It violates the Constitution. It violates people's civil rights. And, of course, we've never seen this happen before as well.
No. So this is an attack on if it comes to Chicago, on the whole city, but the brunt of the attack is going to be felt in the Latino community more than every other place. How does the whole city help? Does it help for people to come to communities like Little Village? Does it help for people to stay away? What is it that, everybody should be out taking pictures of these ICE folks. What is it that all of us can do that's the most helpful?
I think we need to be vigilant and aware, and to look a little closer when people see something shady going on.
Yeah.
People being pulled over, people who may be walking in a group or individually, being interrogated by unmarked cars with masked people. I think recording all of that is very important. What's happened so far with much of that recording of incidents like that, whether in LA or Washington, D.C. or other places, is that it's unmasking the agenda, the extreme agenda of Donald Trump, and people are rejecting it. That's in part why Trump's favorability ratings have plummeted so severely in the past several months, because people respect and want to uphold due process. People think that this is not why they voted for Donald Trump, even if they had prejudices or biases against immigrants. They also recognize that immigrants power our economy, from picking the vegetables and fruits that get to our grocery stores, to doing the hard work in packing houses, getting our beef and our poultry to us, or those who care for our loved ones, whether they're children, whether they are elderly. These are hard jobs, and immigrants power those sectors of the economy, and I think everyone appreciates that. So that's why the president's ratings have plummeted so much. And of course, the cruelty that is on full display, probably best embodied by this alligator Alcatraz prison in Florida, which of course a court has found to be illegal. It's of course on appeal now, but I think that's the type of cruelty that Americans just reject, and it's taking a toll. That's why I think Donald Trump is looking for a confrontation. He wants to capture it on films. He wants to say that there are foreign flags being, waved by people, and that presents an invasion, that presents a threat, and that is a justification. Let's not forget that the assertions of Trump all about immigrants have been false. They're built on a false narrative, but they rely on fear and ignorance to keep them alive and to keep him in power.
Yeah.
So recording, being in solidarity, letting people know that we're watching, that we care, and that we are a friendly city are important messages to be had in this day and age, especially over the next couple of weeks in Chicago, because this is also the kickoff of Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yeah. Oh my God, the uncommon indecency of this man and what he's done. This week, a judge got a call and had to get up at 2 a.m. and work all night long in order to stop Kristi Noem, the Homeland Insecurity, whatever she is, this terrible person, from deporting a plane load, hundreds of children. They kept them on a plane for hours. Yes. They couldn't go to the bathroom. They couldn't do anything, and all night long. And that she was going to whisk them out of the country in secret, and that was stopped. But They keep trying to do things that we know are illegal, and the judges keep telling them they're illegal, and they keep trying to do them.
There are no bounds, no limits. There is no decency in the Department of Homeland Security. Surely there are ICE agents and Border Patrol agents who don't like what they see, but the orders have come down from the top, and that's Kristi Noem at Homeland Security, and those who enable her, like Stephen Miller, and of course some of the other operatives like Tom Homan. It's truly tragic because were it not for the courts, I think hundreds of children would have been deported to Guatemala, to places that they barely know. But that's the cruelty of this administration, and it's very, very tragic. And of course, as it relates to Chicago, let's not forget that, and as was the case with D.C., and is the case with L.A. in California, as it relates to crime, crime has been trending down in each of these communities. I think that in Chicago, a good amount of that downward trend, the reduction in especially violent crimes, though we had a tough weekend last weekend, is attributable to the investments that have been made in community violence intervention programs all over the city, and investments in creating more opportunities for young people, whether it's summer jobs or year-round jobs, whether it's more arts and culture programs in their local communities. That's part of the reason why crime is going down. Another reason is because the economy has been improving, even though there's still lots of inequality in our economy, and many inequities, especially in certain communities. But we're making progress. To come in and say that these communities are out of control, that crime is rampant, is a total lie and a distortion of the reality on the ground. But again, they will just try to find the right imagery to show differently and to exploit through misinformation and disinformation, especially on social media.
So let's just be clear. You and I and everybody in Chicago welcomes the federal government to help us solve our problems. And we would love ATF to help us keep illegal guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't have them in our city. We would love for them to continue to fund those violence reduction programs that are making a difference. But Donald Trump cut both. He cut the money that's being spent on summer jobs. So instead of helping us, he's hurting us. And then he has he thinks it's okay to say, well, why isn't the governor of Illinois calling me to ask me for the National Guard? The National Guard isn't going to help us solve this problem. Getting the guns out will help us. Funding these programs that you cut would help us. Do your job, Mr. Trump.
That's right. Those cuts are hurting Chicago. They're hurting youth jobs. They're hurting investments in violence intervention, which has been shown scientifically to be effective, and that's why crime is going down in Chicago in the worst categories, in the most violent types of crimes, whether it's homicides or armed robberies and other violent crime. They're trending down. Let's also not forget, Edwin, that the Trump administration was trying to withhold $5 billion of school funding for Illinois.
Right.
And it wasn't until we raised holy hell and did it with bipartisan support that they released the money. So that is critical. And when you couple that with the cuts in Medicaid funding, which pays for people, ensures that people have access to health care, when you cut nutrition programs, the consequences are going to be bad, especially for certain communities. And that, those have not gone into full effect yet, but that's additional pain that's coming. But that
will probably result in our crime rates going up. So exactly the opposite of what he wants.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want to go one other place before we're done.
Sure.
A couple generations ago, Black Americans and their allies paid an enormous price to expand civil rights in America. They, with their enormous commitment to this country, despite what the country had done to them, they helped us become a much better place.
Yes.
Today, that burden is falling on the Latino community because of Donald Trump. And I recognize that it is going to cost. It's going to have a huge cost. But I want to say this early before it gets even worse out there. I know people like you and all of our allies out there who are fighting for what's best in America are going to make this country so much better because of this fight.
Yes, I was at a press conference earlier this morning on this subject. I am a beneficiary. I am a connection and a beneficiary to the civil rights struggle. Why? I came to Chicago as an almost 10-year-old in 1965. That's the year the Voting Rights Act was passed. It came on the heels of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It was the Voting Rights Act that helped me get a seat to represent an unrepresented community in the Chicago City Council under Chicago's first breakthrough in electing the first black mayor. So the first black mayor who also advanced the Voting Rights Act when he was a congressperson for a very short period of time, but in factful, was able to win a majority in the council because of the Voting Rights Act by facilitating the election of more black and Latino people to the Chicago City Council. So I am grateful and remain very committed to the civil rights cause and struggle. And that's what this immigration issue is truly about. Congress has failed to address immigration reform for 40 years. Think how much our world and our economy in the country and our society has changed in those 40 years. I mean, back in the day, we didn't have cell phones, right? We didn't have all the information that we have today. We didn't have the technology that we have today, yet our immigration system remains broken and obsolete and unfair. If we had done immigration reform, we wouldn't have this crisis here today. But at the root of the immigration subject matter is a fundamental question of human rights and civil rights. And Donald Trump is seeking to do away with the protection of both of these, of both humanitarian or human rights as well as civil rights. The doing away with due process, the arbitrariness of the ICE raids, violating what has been established law and norms, and just a practice of decency has been thrown out the window, all in an effort to convince the country that there is an emergency, that there is an invasion, that there is an insurrection, that we're surrounded with bad people everywhere. I live in the middle of the barrio. I live in a community that is vibrant, a community where family values and faith and a belief and optimism in the future where people want to pursue the American dream really, really bad, who send their kids, who allow their kids to go into the military in hopes that that will happen, who simply want to contribute to this country, who are law-abiding, who are building communities, who are building very productive and successful trips all over Chicago and in suburban communities as well. Yet all of that is being disregarded, thrown out the window, and replaced with this persecution under the guises of a false narrative of criminality among immigrants, when in fact immigrants tend to be even better well-behaved and more respectful of the law than U.S.-born Americans.
Yep. All right, everybody. Look, I want you to reflect on what you've just heard from Congressman Garcia and think, just keep it in mind as you hear the lies coming from the White House in the coming weeks as they target this great city. Chewy, I can't thank you enough for your time and your leadership on this and so many other things.
Great to join you today to have this conversation. And to you and all the listeners out there, let's keep the faith and let's continue to stand up for our American democratic values.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
Welcome back, everybody. I am delighted to be joined by Samantha Tarasi. She co-founded and leads the Voting Rights Lab. It's an organization that is fighting a really important fight to secure and expand voting rights in all 50 states. It wasn't that long ago that was not, considered like the central fight that we had to engage in this democracy because people actually believed in voting. We have a problem now. Before that, she was a leader of a fight for common sense gun legislation, and both then and now in this job, her efforts have helped build an engaged civil society with large networks of people and broader coalitions that are, and I believe in this moment, the principal source of democratic resilience in our country. Sam, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Edwin. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, forgive me if I'm a little distracted. The news of Donald Trump bragging about what he's going to do to my city it has me not on edge, but just disappointed in our country and angry. And I'm not worried. I'm just so disappointed that a president would behave like that. Anyway, it isn't just. I think all this troop stuff is a prelude to suppressing votes later. So let's talk about what we can do to strengthen our commitment to democracy and elections.
Yep, happy to do that. So let me tell you a little bit about Voting Rights Lab. So we are a national nonpartisan organization that focuses on state elections because states really are the place where the rules dictate how our elections are run. It's not dictated by the president. And so
good choice of words there, Sam. Very good choice of words.
Yes, it's a very hot topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we track and analyze voting and elections laws and also propose changes to those laws via legislation in all 50 states. We look at and highlight how to strengthen our elections, and we also sound the alarm when election threats emerge. And I think there are a number of things to be focusing on right now in that category.
So we'll get to those in 1 second. I want to give everybody a plug for your, 50 state election policy tracker. I mean, there are folks. You can go on Sam's website, the Voting Rights Lab website, and you can look and see what's going on in every state with regards to free and fair and inclusive elections, ones where we're all encouraged to vote. And there's, of course, as you would expect in a in a country with 50 states where people don't all agree on things, we do things differently in different states, for sure. Some states are expanding voting rights, some are trying to crush them. But you can find all of that. And it's really a terrific resource for journalists, for activists, for citizens.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Edwin. It's a comprehensive database of lots, almost all voting and elections related law and legislation that we've made available to the public because we think it's important that people be able to access all kinds of information, including how their laws might be changing now, how their rules have changed over the last couple of years, what's being proposed across multiple states, so that we can understand the full landscape. Because you're right, it is different in all 50 states.
Yep. And we spend a lot of time on the show talking about democracy in the states. So people are used to understanding how important gerrymandering is in states, voting rights is in states. And thank goodness it's not all directed by Washington. Now, thank goodness right now. So let's talk about some of the things that raise alarms right now. What are what are you looking at?
Well, I think overall we're seeing a trend from this president that he is starting to get nervous about the 2026 midterms and the 2028 presidential election. And there are a number of ways that he is attempting to overreach into state-run elections. But I will foreshadow and say there is good news here, which is he doesn't really have that authority. So I want to kind of unpack both what he is doing and how it is not working and what we can do to stop it. So I would say Trump's overarching goal is to either disrupt or deny election results he does not like. And the way that he's doing that is by pushing for changes to rules that make it harder for eligible voters to register and to cast their ballots. But also, he's eroding Americans' trust in our elections, which makes them easier to manipulate and control. He's casting doubt on tried and true voting methods, which ultimately creates a narrative and a story, giving himself or his allies ready-made excuses to challenge future results he does not like. So a couple of examples. He's taken to social media lately, announcing that he's going to ban all mail-in voting. But literally every single state allows some form of mail-in voting, and a third of voters in 2024 used mail-in ballots. Because no state in the country runs elections the way Trump is demanding, it does make every state vulnerable to unfounded claims from Trump or his allies. But the good news is states and Congress that can control our elections. Trump doesn't have authority over it. And this type of overreach into our elections, it really only works if state and local officials go along with it.
Okay, so let's. Did he just do this recently on mail-in ballots in his social media, or was that also an executive order?
He has been threatening an executive order on mail-in ballots. That may or may not materialize. Also, he signed an executive order on elections earlier this year in March.
I was going to ask you about that. He did, indeed.
Yeah, he did. It was a very broad-reaching executive order. In fact, his advisors at the time called it the most broad-reaching executive order he had signed. And you probably remember he was signing a lot of executive orders this spring.
Was that not like to make the SAVE Act the law? It was sort of his version of that. It was about who could register. Yeah. So the SAVE Act is a piece of federal legislation that would require every voter to produce co-citizenship to register and vote. It is currently not going anywhere in this Congress, but that general principle was the hallmark of his March executive order to require that proof of citizenship. What's really important for everyone to know is that every state
already verifies voter identity and citizenship. It is already the law that only citizens can vote. The problem with that type of proposal is the number of eligible voters that would be prevented from voting. And that's not a theoretical problem. Kansas actually tried a proof of citizenship law, and during the 3 years that it was in effect, 1 in 8 eligible voters were blocked from voting. 1 in 8. It was just pretty astronomical.
Let's just talk about, make sure people understand this. If you're listening, imagine the language the business community has used a lot about regulation, how too much paperwork and too much regulation slows business down, makes things harder to make a profit and do what you need to do. So what the Republicans have proposed, and Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, is an enormous, burdensome paperwork requirement to prove that you are not only, you're the citizen, not just that you're a citizen, but you're the citizen you say you are. So like if you are a married woman and you took your husband's name, you may be a citizen, you may not be the citizen you say you are, because is that the birth certificate the same as what you're registered as? There's an enormous paperwork burden. And that's what's a big problem.
Exactly. I think actually Trump and his allies drastically underestimated Americans' hatred of bureaucracy. Because when they understand what this would require of them, they realize that this is really just government overreach that would impact eligible voters. You're right about married women. 80% of married women in the U.S. change their names when they get married. So that means about half of voting age women in this country do not have a birth certificate that matches their legal name. And then when you talk about passports, is just slightly over 40% of Americans who have passports. So we are not talking about a simple barrier here. This is quite astronomical.
Astronomical.
And when Trump signed...
Go ahead. Sorry. My apologies. Go ahead.
No worries. No worries. When Trump signed that executive order in March, we saw states rushing to fast-track copycat legislation. Like I said earlier, Trump does not have authority to mandate how our elections are run. So I actually don't believe that any of these executive orders or these threatened executive orders are designed to withstand legal scrutiny. Most of his March executive order has already been struck down by the court. I think it's actually more important to think about it and to understand it as a set of marching orders to Trump's allies in the states, because it's the states that then rush to fast-track proof of citizenship legislation. And all told, 27 states introduced and rushed forward proof of citizenship bills this year.
Yep.
There is some good news, Edwin, which is actually not a single state adopted Trump's core demand of requiring passports or birth certificates. Not a single one out of 27.
Yep. I fear some other use of these executive orders. The mindset of this administration is, God says, let there be light, and there's light. So Donald Trump says, this is the law, and they act as if it is, even though courts have said it isn't. I worry that that when the results of the elections come in and they do not prevail, they will say, well, you can't trust those results from California or Illinois or Michigan because they didn't follow my executive order. They didn't follow the rules. So everybody there was voting illegally. And they'll say we won't see them in Congress. Just have that fight.
Yeah, it's a very real possibility and a very real threat. I think we have the law on our side. Because Trump's overreach, his overreach really only works if state and local officials go along with it. So that's where the role of governors and secretaries of state and state legislators and election administrators are really important, that they stand up for their own laws. In addition to that,
some of those laws are terrible, man. Some of those state laws, they are followed. I mean, let's talk about the states that are criminalizing aspects of voting. For example, I don't know, if you don't cure an issue with a ballot, it's a crime. Or election officials being threatened with a crime, like go to jail crime, if you send out a ballot application.
Yeah, there has been a move to intimidate election officials across the board, and I think we've seen a number of those election officials leave their jobs in the last few years because of the way their roles have been politicized and for fear of their own safety. In fact, I think another way that this is playing out, the focus on election administrators, is Trump is weaponizing the Department of Justice to intimidate state election officials and demand that they give him access to their voter registration lists. And I think that all is really an effort to force very aggressive voter registration list purging.
Yes, and I guess election equipment too, which is even more terrifying.
Yeah, he wants to get rid of all voting equipment, which would really expose our elections to a tremendous amount of human error in the counting process. I mean, just imagine hundreds and thousands and millions of ballots being counted by hand. What could go wrong there?
Right, and not more accurate.
Yeah, definitely not more accurate. No.
So they're criminalizing some behaviors they don't like, but as usual, the notion that this is about some kind of crime is as big a lie when we're talking about elections as it is we're talking about sending troops into my city. Because when someone is found guilty, and here I'm thinking of someone named Tina Peters, and maybe you can tell everybody who she is. The president of the United States is demanding that she be freed. He doesn't have the power to pardon her.
Yeah, she's a former county clerk in Mesa County in Arizona who is a big Trump ally. And as we've seen with a number of cases, Trump has been rewriting some history related to our elections in order to prop up his allies. I do think getting to back to your point about the weaknesses versus the strengths of our elections, one thing I do want to mention is that there are ways that we can strengthen elections now to bolster them against this type of overreach, which I think is worth mentioning. These are policies that actually have, believe it or not, bipartisan support because they increase the integrity, the security, and the kind of strength of the overall election infrastructure. So a couple of ones I want to mention are there's a lot that can actually be done to increase the speed of reporting results. Because I think the longer it takes to report results, the more vulnerable our elections are to.
We certainly found that in 2020.
Theories. Exactly. Yeah. So, for example, I'm going to call out Pennsylvania. They don't allow their election administrators to pre-process mail-in ballots. And so what that means is that election administrators, they can't start verifying voter identity until election day. So that means all these mail ballots are just piling up. And in a close race, that could really mean that their results are going to take a lot longer to report. Or there have been efforts to eliminate early voting, which is another important way to help election administrators get ahead on the pre-processing of ballots. So Trump's vision of every American voting in person on election day is really untenable. And in addition to being nearly logistically impossible, given that's not the way most Americans vote now, I think it's very important that we look at some of the ways that we can speed up election results.
Sure.
But there's
voting. Hang on. Still on that one. Put that together with everyone voting on the same day. Okay, that'll suppress turnout. But let's say we all did, and then counting all those ballots by hand, you wouldn't have results for a long time if you counted them all that way. And so you would have instead candidates declaring victory and saying, "Don't bother to count the rest of the votes." That's what we saw that in Bush v. Gore.
Yeah, I think we would find in a scenario like that the proposed solutions coming from Trump do not actually yield the results that he's claiming they would. You're right, that it would not speed anything up. It would not make anything more secure. It would not instill trust. Yeah.
Okay, so keep going.
There's also a number of things that can be done to tighten the rules around election certification, which is the step in the process after all the votes have been cast and verified and counted and confirmed to certifying them as official. And there's a number of states that have not implemented passed laws that certification is non-discretionary. And it leaves it open to bad actors who might want to say, I want to take a couple of months to look at this result.
Indeed, we saw that in past elections.
We have seen that in Pennsylvania. We saw that recently in North Carolina, an attempt to throw out a bunch of ballots and delay certification processes. And so it's important that there's very clear laws on the books about this is how certification is non-discretionary, and this is the process to replace officials who refuse to certify so that things don't get held up. So Arizona, New Hampshire, Texas, Wisconsin, even Georgia, Pennsylvania, there's some improvement opportunities to be made there that can really shore up our elections. And then the last one I want to mention is in some states, they audit their election results out of order. And we think it would be important to do the audit before the certification process so that everyone has clear, transparent data about the audited results that are accurate. So, for example, Florida, Michigan, and Texas, they all lack pre-certification audits. So when we talk about the weaknesses in state laws, those are the areas I would focus people's attention as real opportunities to bolster our elections against interference, especially in the political climate that we're in today.
Really important, really important. And I think some states are receptive to doing that, but there are some states following directives from the White House. They're not interested in the same goal that you're talking about, which is how do we make our elections more trusted? How do we reinstill in Americans' faith that they are fair?
Yeah, I think we've definitely seen some states who, for example, are responding to the DOJ request to have access to their voter rolls to comply with that. But for the most part, I'm not super concerned that the DOJ has been given access to confidential information yet.
Yep.
I think most of the voter rolls that have been shared are publicly available. So it will come down to state and local officials either being complicit or following their state laws. And I think that's a real opportunity for everyday Americans and advocates alike to know what their state laws are and to really stand up for them.
And Americans like to vote. I mean, I know we don't have the highest turnout in the world, but most Americans like to vote, and they like the idea that they get to vote. And when people show up at a polling place and they get told you can't vote, they get angry and concerned. And every time you vote, in person at least, the people who are running those polling places are your neighbors. It's a very local affair in America, how we run elections. And that makes it resilient, makes it much harder to abuse from Washington, D.C.
Yeah. Our elections are very distributed in that nature. They are defined by the states, and they are run by our counties. And you're right that, like, our poll workers are friends and neighbors doing heroes work to make sure that our democracy runs. So I think they all deserve our gratitude for doing that.
Are you worried about interference that goes beyond tinkering with election law or registration? Are you worried that we will see in the near future this militarization effort, this thing I'm about to see in my city? We will see troops around polling places saying, well, we know illegals are voting in there and we are going to stop that. I mean, will there be the kind of disruption by force that Americans last saw in the 1870s after the Civil War?
I think it is entirely possible. I would not write anything off at this point in time. But I will say that to me, that makes it more important that Americans consider registering to vote early and casting their ballots early, and that they really demand from their governors and secretaries of state and other leaders to know that they have a plan in place should they find their city or their state the target of a military takeover or some other form of federal overreach into the states during election time. I think that's entirely possible, but it's a good reason to get your application in for your mail-in ballot now.
Oh my gosh, just hearing you say that, it just gives me shivers. Sam, I teach a course on democracy in a local college here, and I'm finding my students, they were in 8th grade when January 6th happened. Donald Trump has been the definition of an American leader for their entire adult lives. It's hard for young people to know that we can be a different kind of country. Well, I mean, what would you tell them?
Such a good question. My son is just about to turn 2 years old, so we're not yet talking about these issues, but I do think about what I will say to him and what I spend my day doing and what he should think about this country. I would say that I love this country, and I think there's a lot of things about America to be very proud of, and there's a lot of things we need to also work on. And that what we see now in our leadership is not what we will always see. The most important thing is that we cannot be nihilistic, because that is part of Trump's playbook. He wants us to believe that there's nothing we can do about it, that we might as well go back to social media or start streaming more shows on TV than to worry about the future of our country. And in fact, I don't think that everything is a foregone conclusion at this point. I do think that it is an unprecedented time, but there's nothing better to do than to fight for our rights and to improve our democracy.
Well, I love what you're doing. I love that you're out there doing it. For better or worse, we live in a meaningful time, which means the decisions we make matter. And the ones that you're making to focus on elections, to make them freer, fairer, more inclusive of more citizens who can vote, is just the stuff that's going to give us a future. So thank you, Sam. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you so much, Edwin. Thank you for the conversation, and thank you to all your listeners.
We'll talk again. Take care.
Yep. Bye.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a break, and then an award-winning journalist, Radley Balco, is going to join us when we come back.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, as I promised, Radley Balco is here. He is an award-winning journalist, an author. He publishes The Watch on Substack, and I read it. I think it's great. I think you should too. Radley, first, welcome. Second, oh my gosh, what a morning it's been already.
Yeah, no kidding. I didn't realize, that everything would kind of blow up the way it did before we had our interview.
Yeah, well, happily not literally, at least yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I mean, see, for those of you who are listening, what we're talking about is Donald Trump posted a picture of himself. It's a cartoon where he is, in his sort of gear saying, I love the smell of deportations in the morning. You're going to find out why it's called, Chicago's going to find out why it's called the War Department, and an image of our lakefront with helicopters flying over it like it's Vietnam, and it's sort of a takeoff on Apocalypse Now coming to Chicago. Leaving aside,
which of course about as a military leader who loses
is
his
insane.
mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, right. So that part I get. You lived through this in D.C., right? And you paid a lot of attention to it. What really was going on? What was going on there, so we can have some sense of what to expect here?
Yeah. So actually, I live in Nashville, Tennessee, but I was okay. I was in D.C. For a conference, actually, the first weekend that the National Guard were deployed there.
My fault.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of surreal because I was actually at a conference on the future of American liberalism and democracy as the Guard troops were being deployed to Washington. Look, I mean, what we saw in D.C., or what we've seen in D.C. is, National Guard troops basically being used for show to kind of project strength, particularly in tourist areas. They weren't really deployed to high crime areas. And then meanwhile, what we saw, so we didn't see National Guard troops, actively sort of interacting with D.C. residents. What we did see is at the same time, ICE and DHI and Border Patrol and FBI and ATF and DEA, because Trump's been pulling people from all of these agencies, were conducting immigration raids. They were harassing people. They were pulling people out of their cars. They were conducting illegal checkpoints on roads. They were busting people for things like drinking on their own porch or smoking marijuana in public. So it was, basically an occupation of D.C., but the most sort of aggressive, what we think of when we think of militarized policing were being done by the police, not the military.
Yeah, I am struck by the unbelievable change of branding, in like a couple of days by this administration. They said crime is out of control in Chicago. It's a lie. Crime is not out of control in Chicago. Crime is down in Chicago, like it is in D.C. And the things that would make it go down further are the things that Donald Trump is withholding, not the things that he's giving.
Right.
Right. So he initially pitched it as, I'm going to make the city, I'm going to go fight crime. And now you saw this morning, crime has nothing to do with it, and it's entirely about deportation and ICE.
Yeah,
right? So that's an enormous change because he got called out on his lie and it didn't work. But now he's threatening to use the military, the War Department for deportations. And I think the law is, sorry, buddy, nope, can't do it.
Well, I mean, it depends on who's going to be able to stop him. I don't think he's going to use the National Guard for deportations just yet. I think he's going to do what he's done in other cities, which is use all of these other federal police agencies. By the way, those agencies aren't doing the normal policing that they do, right? When he takes an FBI agent and puts them on immigration enforcement, that FBI agent isn't, investigating organized crime or terrorism or counterintelligence. They're basically walking beats and looking for undocumented people. It also is contrary. I mean, you're right. I mean, this was never about crime. I do think, I think what Trump is doing is a little bit more nefarious, though, than just simply trying to meet his immigration quotas. I think he wants to, first of all, get the country accustomed to the idea of military, of soldiers patrolling the streets, that make this something that, right now it's something that's alarming and pretty jarring and that we don't associate with a free society. And I think he wants to kind of jettison that norm. I think the other thing he's trying to do is Trump has always been infatuated with this idea of having his own henchmen, his own muscle, right? If you remember during his first term, he would always tweet about the bikers and cops and soldiers who would, rough up. And he signed an executive order a couple of weeks ago that puts Pete Hegseth, of all people, in charge of creating what he calls these rapid deployment units within the Guard. And these are basically, teams of Guard soldiers that Pete Hegseth would personally staff and provide the training for and oversee that Trump could send to any city at any time for any reason. And, Pete Hegseth has no law enforcement experience or background. And Pete Hegseth, we saw yesterday in the Oval Office with his little poem that, he's all about lethality and he defends war criminals. This is a guy who thinks the sole purpose of soldiers. Right, is to kill people. And so he's going to be in charge of these units that Trump's going to send, whenever there's a protest that breaks out that he thinks, is insulting to him or is a threat to his power. He's going to send it in whenever a Democratic, to any Democratic mayor who, dares to oppose him or stand up to him. That, I think, is where we are headed. Whatever Trump's justification for sending troops into cities right now, I think that is kind of the end goal.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think in the interim, I know what they're trying to do in our city is to incite a backlash that they can forcibly put down on the cameras.
Yep. I think they want that.
Right. And they have their own provocateurs in crowds. It's going to be very difficult. It's very difficult to maintain calm and peace when you have stormtroopers marching through your streets and you have the allies of those stormtroopers in the crowds trying to incite them.
And I mean, there's a mountain of research going back decades on the psychology of crowds and mobs and protests. And what the research shows is that they tend to be very self-policing, right? They want to be seen as legitimate. They want to be heard. And so when there are bad actors, they tend to self-police and try to keep them in line. Where all that changes is when the police come out, looking like, an occupying force, when they're covering their faces, when they immediately start using violence, and everybody kind of unites against the common enemy. This is why, in D.C. for years, because there are so many protests in D.C., the city knows how to respond to protests, and they respond to it in a way that facilitates the free speech of the protesters. There have been some exceptions over the years, but for the most part, you don't see a lot of violence with protests in D.C. You do see it in other cities that aren't accustomed to them, where they take a very, kind of cracking skulls approach, and that's what leads to violence. But I think you're right. I mean, I think they want an altercation because that gives them an excuse to crack down even harder.
Yeah, I need to put a stake in the ground when you said that you don't see violent protests that often in D.C. and just say January 6th, January 6th, January 6th.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's the exception, in part because they one, it was a completely different, crowd. They had completely different intentions. They didn't just want to be heard. They wanted to overthrow an election. But also, intelligence agencies knew what was coming, and they failed to prepare for it for political reasons. I mean, that's why that got out of hand so quickly.
Right. Donald Trump couldn't be bothered with the National Guard then, but now he's found the button, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
I had dinner with a lovely and smart man earlier this week, and he does not like what Donald Trump's doing, but he asked a question. I've heard it from, former Republicans and a lot of people who said, aren't the optics bad for a guy like J.B. Pritzker for not at least asking Trump for his help in dealing with crime in this city? And it took me a long time for my blood pressure to come down and explain to him why I thought that question was ill-informed. But I'd like to hear how you would have answered it.
Well, I think there are lots of ways to go about answering that. I mean, first, one thing I like to point out over and over again is, despite Trump's, images of American carnage that he tried to paint in 2016 at his inauguration, he inherited the lowest homicide rate of any president in the modern era, basically since we've been keeping statistics. He had the lowest homicide rate, ever for a president, at least in the last 100 years or so. He left office. He was the first president in 40 years to leave office with a higher homicide rate than he entered, right? So now, I don't think presidents, for the most part, there are some exceptions, but for the most part, I don't think they have much effect on the crime rate, particularly, at the state and local level. But, if President Trump is going to claim that he and he alone can bring down crime, I think it's worth pointing out that in his first administration, he did not do that. Crime got worse. The other thing I would say is that, Chicago, as I'm sure you know, and you mentioned earlier, is on pace, I believe, last I checked, to have a 60-year low in homicides this year. Baltimore, I think, is approaching a 45 or 50-year low. L.A. is heading for a 40-year low. In Washington, D.C., I think the violent crime rate was close to a 30-year low, or is on pace to have a 30-year low. So, part of that is coming back from the way crime spiked during the pandemic, which, there are lots of different explanations and reasons for that. And I don't think we'll ever know exactly why it went up. But, part of it is also is that, as you mentioned, I think these cities are doing what they need to do. They're implementing violence, interruption programs. They're having actual mental health professionals respond to people who are having mental health crises instead of responding with a SWAT team. They are, they're reinvesting in mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment, where a lot of those programs were disrupted during the pandemic for various funding reasons. So the president traditionally has not had much of a role in criminal justice policy at the state and local level. Really no role at all. It has largely been left to local government. And Chicago and D.C. both have always had a higher crime rate than other cities of their size, comparably, but both are down dramatically. So why, if it's moving in the right direction, why would you risk disrupting what's happening if the trend's moving in the correct direction? And that's one thing we know that will happen is when you send, a bunch of federal law enforcement officers and National Guard troops into a city, that is going to disrupt lots of things that are going on in those cities. It's going to make, entire communities mistrustful and less trustful of government and government officials. The deportations that Trump's doing, local police chiefs all over the country have been complaining that when you ramp up deportations like this, it makes immigrant communities less likely to cooperate with police, less likely to report crimes, and crime, as a consequence, tends to go up. That also happened during Trump's first administration. So, the idea of asking for Trump's help to bring down crime, would be like asking for Trump's help to end corruption in Chicago, right? He is the cause of he is the cause of the very thing you're asking him to come in and fix.
He's quick to want to take people who may be here in violation of the law out of here. He has not thought for a second about taking the illegal guns that are all over our city and doing anything with that. ATF had been helpful to the city at different times in identifying and interdicting the flow of weapons into Chicago. 6 in 10 guns involved in crimes here are traced to red states and exported here to the city. ATF could help us with that, but I guess he's not really interested in that.
Well, one of the first things Jeanine Pirro did as U.S. Attorney in D.C. was she announced that she wouldn't be prosecuting illegal gun possession crimes in D.C.
That's because sandwiches are so much more dangerous.
Right. Look, that's an issue that they're not going to go anywhere near.
No. So, it's never been about crime, not for 1 second. You are doing, I want to just change the subject a little bit from crime stats, Trump's weaponization of everything, and talk to you about journalism for a minute. You went from sort of traditional journalism to you're on your own telling the truth. And we have this enormous problem with corporate-owned journalism anymore. And I mean, this week, Amy Coney Barrett launched a book tour. And, one of her first stops was to be interviewed by Barry Weiss, the polemicist who will soon be running CBS. What do you make of that? And is that partly why you do what you do now?
Yeah, look, I mean, I used to work for the Washington Post. I did opinion writing, but also investigative reporting for the opinion section at the Post. And they actually fired me before kind of the big purge that they've done recently. An editor took over who, I don't know, just wasn't a fan of my work apparently. So I've actually been away from the Post for about 3 years, and that was before the big exodus that we've seen. Look, I mean, I think the reporters at the Post are still, the ones that are still there, which a lot of them are left. The ones that are still there are still breaking stories. I still think the New York Times is an important publication that does important investigative journalism, as much as I often, disagree with their framing or their headlines or their, reluctance to call things what they are. But I also, I've always called myself an opinion journalist, which is to say I don't consider myself objective. I have a viewpoint that I don't try to hide, and I think readers should be aware of that viewpoint and read my work accordingly. But I always I do reporting. I try to base my articles and investigations on facts and documents and reality and interviews with sources. But I think there's room for all of that. I think what's happening right now with the Washington Post under Bezos and what we're seeing at CBS is the same thing we're seeing kind of writ large, which is that institutions are buckling under the pressure, and it's really crushing to see because this is what's supposed to be saving us, right? These are the whole point of civil society is that you have these institutions that are supposed to kind of be our shelter in a storm like this. And, I think Trump is a huge threat to democracy. I think this country's in a lot of trouble, but it's also like we deserve a better ending than this, right? I mean, our institutions it's not just that they're buckling and caving and capitulating. It's like they're doing all those things to this guy, right? Like the guy who has to win every handshake, right? It would be one thing if, it were a, politically astute fascist who, was very deft in what he was doing. Instead, we've got this kind of clown he keeps tripping over his own ego. And you have all the tech titans going for dinner at the White House the other night and tripping over themselves to, compliment him and flatter him. It's just been, I guess, kind of a wake-up call. But, I guess if there's something to take hope in, it's that we're seeing more, courage and principle from, the Little League coach who refused to let his kids talk to ICE agents in upstate New York a few weeks ago, from the people we see pulling their cell phones out and recording, this abuse by ICE agents of people. We're seeing more spine, from people who have relatively little power than we are from, the billionaires and the universities and the big law firms and the major institutions. And on the one hand, that's, really crushing and worrying. On the other hand, there's a lot more little people than there are big people. And the fact that we are seeing that from the people with very little power, I think is something to take heart in.
I think so, too. I think it will be ordinary people who save a democracy that's for ordinary Americans. That says we the people. But there are some big guys who have stepped up. Some law firms did not cave. And I tell everybody who's listening to take your law business to them and walk away from the ones who did. And I mean, Harvard is about as big a name as there is in higher ed, and it has been unbelievably courageous.
It's true.
At great cost to them.
And Pritzker, I mean, your governor has been.
My governor?
I've been. I mean, he's an inspiration. Like I've gone from sort of being aware of who he is and not having a strong opinion either way to, I mean, this is where the Democratic Party needs to be right now. He's leading the way.
He's doing a very good job. And, it's a family with wonderful values. And I can say that not all billionaires, are alike. It's a family with wonderful values. His sister leads Harvard, is head of their board. So, it's,
yeah. I'm going to have to start staying at Hyatt's, I guess.
Yeah, right. They've stepped up. They're doing what they should, and I'm deeply proud of them as fellow Chicagoans. And by the way, I think my city is going to step up under this siege, and will be the city that's remembered like Harvard has been, the one that doesn't buckle when he says bend your knee.
I don't doubt that. As an Indianapolis native, I've always had a little envy of Chicago over the years, or I guess dislike for sports reasons. But it's a wonderful city. I actually spent my 50th birthday there a few months ago, and we had a great time. And I love that city, and I have no doubt that you all are going to stand up and show what you're made of here.
I think so. I mean, it's going to be tough, though. Wow, it's going to be a really ugly couple of weeks, I think. I made a suggestion that the mayor, take the Trump letters off Trump Tower, dump them in the Chicago River, and let Trump litigate about it for the rest of his term.
I got to say, I'm an architecture buff, and one of the things I love about the city is I've done the architecture boat tour a number of times. Yeah. And every time you get to that Trump building, it is just a blight on a beautiful skyline. It's just such a hideous, garish building that, just really interrupts the flow of all the other buildings around it.
Well, yeah, it's mostly the name on the building that I object to, but yeah, it definitely is out of a different place. And the building that was there before it was a newspaper. It was the Chicago Sun-Times. Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time and your work. Tell everybody how to find it, and tell them, what they can look forward to coming in the next, what you're up to.
Yeah, sure. I have a newsletter at Substack called The Watch. It's where I publish a lot of my work. I write for various freelance publications on a freelance basis, but The Watch is, all the content is free, but I make my living off of people who subscribe just to support my work. So coming up, I'm going to continue writing about what's going on, but I also have done a lot of investigative reports. I've got a report coming about a death penalty case in Louisiana about a guy who's innocent, trying to get off of death row, and about another one about some wrongful child sexual abuse allegations about a guy in D.C. My beat is criminal justice and civil liberties. That's what I've written about for most of my career. Yeah. It's just that I think pretty much everything this administration does affects criminal justice and civil liberties at this point. So it's kind of interesting because my issues are often sort of not in the headlines, the political headlines. And for the last, 7 months, you can't really separate those issues from what's happening nationally.
Well, I guess I wasn't going to go here, but when you think about criminal justice, has there ever been a time, where the Justice Department has gone as far astray as they have here? I don't think that happened, in Nixon even though he went to jail with John Mitchell. Have we ever seen a Justice Department as weaponized as this?
I don't think so. Mitchell went to jail because the Justice Department did what it's supposed to do and prosecuted him. This Justice Department isn't going to prosecute anyone. And that's one of the things that's really scary about Trump's federalization and militarization of these cities is that federal law enforcement officers have no civil liability, right? The Supreme Court has basically made it impossible that, state and local police have qualified immunity, which people talk about. Federal law enforcement don't even have that. They have no liability whatsoever. And so the only way to hold them accountable for abusing people is for the Justice Department to criminally prosecute them. And, Trump's DOJ has made it clear that they're not going to prosecute them. So these officers are all being told by Trump that, immigrants are vermin who poison the blood of our country, and, it's all gung-ho and quotas and go out and get them, and there's no penalty for going too far. And I think that's a really, really dangerous territory there.
That is going to be our last warning and last word. Radley, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. All right, everybody, go find The Watch on Substack. We're going to take a break for the news, and then we're going to talk about science and politics next.
You're listening to The Big Picture with Edwin Eisendrath on WCPT 820.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Look, this week, HHS Secretary Bobby Kennedy defended the destruction of science, cited specious studies, championed his effort to make sure more, how do I say this, more parents will watch their children die of preventable diseases. Proudly paraded his ignorance as around the halls of Congress. And there were a lot of congressmen who were okay with that, but some weren't, and some Republicans weren't. And they were doctors and scientists, right? So while he and Donald Trump undermine federal scientific research by making those grants tied to politics rather than science, while, we learn that they don't even care about the science of protecting us from cyber attacks. We learn the Chinese have hacked basically details of every American. Thank goodness there are people out there trying to bring folks into politics who understand something about science. And the rise of the idiots hasn't gone unnoticed. And some people are working hard to recover what we've lost. One of them is, of course, Shaughnessy Naughton, president of 314 Action. I'm sure you won't remember this, but Shaughnessy was on this show in 2021, I think. Shaughnessy, welcome back.
Be back with you.
First, will you remind everybody what 314 Action is and why it's so important?
Yes. Well, thank you. 314 Action is the only organization working to elect scientists to public office, everything from city council and state legislatures up through the U.S. Congress and U.S. Senate. And it's a nod to pi, which is used throughout the sciences, which starts with 314.
Yeah, and how's that going?
Well, clearly this week with the hearings with RFK Jr. demonstrated why it is so imperative. This really is our moment to elect even more scientists to public office. But you could see, even on the Republican side, we work to elect Democratic scientists. But even on the Republican side, they were, Senator Cassidy, who's a physician, and Barrasso were challenging RFK's behavior as Secretary of Health and Human Services. So we started this just about 10 years ago. It actually grew out of my own experience. I was a chemist. I ran for Congress, and I discovered that it was going to take more than just my energy and good ideas to get there. And I garnered a lot of support from the scientific community, and ultimately, I lost by less than anyone was expecting, but I learned a lot in the process. And part of what I learned was that it's really hard to break into politics if you don't come from that traditional business law background. And so I founded 314 Action to recruit, train, and elect people with scientific backgrounds.
And again, in the last few years, how many have been elected? How what's been the reception out there on the campaign trails? I mean, Illinois has a few really wonderful scientists who serve in office.
I think Illinois has our largest state contingency. Yes, in 2018, we helped to flip the U.S. House by electing 8 new members to the House and 1 to the Senate. And we've continued to build on that each election cycle, even in really challenging environments for Democratic candidates. Last year, we elected 7 new scientists to the U.S. House. 3 of them actually unseated Republicans. And I'd also like to note that 6 of the 7 actually we had previously elected to their state legislatures. To me, that just reinforced why it is so important that we invest not just at the federal level, but up and down the ballot for the good that can happen, having scientists serve on school committees and state legislatures, but also to build that pipeline of talent to higher office.
Well, yeah, I am a big fan of running everywhere. I mean, for one thing, you directly impact people's lives, and I'm not sure it's higher office, it's different office. But like local mayors, local state legislators have an enormous impact on people's lives. Enormous. So it's great that you're focused there. Yep. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, the folks serving in local and state offices are often the ones carrying out the things that really affect our lives, whether it's education policy or healthcare funding. A lot of that really does get decided at the state and local level.
Yeah, and some of these are scientific kinds of water quality. Right now we have states trying to figure out what vaccines people should have because Bobby Kennedy has made the CDC. By the way, one of the greatest institutions that we created in our government, he has destroyed it.
It is going to take a long time to fix what the damage that is being done under this administration, and in particular, what RFK Jr. is doing to our public health systems, the CDC, the FDA. It's really it's ridiculous.
How does the great gerrymander, this Texas version of firing the first shot at Fort Sumter, this betrayal of the idea that we're all living in the same democracy, we don't want to live in a country where you get to vote. How does that impact your choices of where to focus your resources?
Well, this year, even prior to the announcement about Texas, we had put a very concerted effort into our recruitment efforts for 2026 to make sure that we win back the House and gain back a lever of power in Washington. So this year we have already launched over 150 campaigns of scientists running from the local level through Congress. We have candidates running in almost every state. And at the federal level, we have launched over 40 campaigns for Congress and Senate. A number of them are in California, so we will see what happens with the maps there. But when you have a president with a 43% approval rating, that is hard to gerrymander your way out of that. And I do think that the American people are paying attention to what's going on and don't like it. This is not what people voted for. People voted for lower prices. Instead, we're getting,
higher prices. Yeah.
Higher prices, clean energy projects shut down, National Guard troops wasting our taxpayer dollars picking up garbage.
Yeah. Yep. So I wonder how your efforts and local Democratic Party efforts work together. Sometimes local Democratic parties in the old days were like, we don't want nobody sent. And, they want to pick their own folks and promote them. But more recently, the Democrats, and by Democrats here I'm talking about the parties themselves, not more broadly, have been much more open about embracing candidates of quality wherever they come from. How are you finding the reception of in the states of the state parties to your candidates?
Very good. In a number of states, we work very closely with the state party or caucus to really take a lead on recruitment. They have seen that that's a real value add that we can provide, and that it's one that's extremely time-consuming and challenging. But we have shown we are able to recruit strong candidates and help stand up their campaigns and provide the support and resources they need to get over the finish line and start doing good in local and state office.
My apologies. I got disconnected for just a moment. Shaughnessy, you were telling me about the time-consuming effort of recruiting candidates of quality across the states.
But it's also really rewarding. I mean, I live in Pennsylvania, and two of the folks that we helped elect, one a physician and one a nurse, to our state house here in Pennsylvania, which did ultimately flip control of the state house to Democrats, are really taking a lead on fighting back against some of these really reckless policies coming out of RFK Jr.'s HHS, for example, leading on making sure that people can get the COVID vaccine, regardless of the restrictions that RFK Jr. is trying to put on it. So it is a challenge, but it's also quite rewarding. And I think we benefit. There isn't an issue that our country faces, whether at the state or national level, that doesn't benefit by having fact-based, data-driven scientists at the governing table, and not just waiting to be, tapped as polite advisors. This moment really speaks to that. Is that this is an all hands on deck moment. We need people making their voices heard, stepping up to run, and getting elected to try to right some of what is so wrong right now.
We'll see how long it lasts. I don't know what Comcast is doing. Hello?
Oh, hello. Yes.
Yeah, if I get disconnected, call me on my phone.
Okay.
Shaughnessy, I need a scientist. My cable company seems to be having some trouble.
That's usually the joke I make on our Zoom presentation.
Look, I love that you helped flip the Pennsylvania House. I love that. It's and this is going on all over the country. So how do you think we are able to go out and talk about science and the importance of facts I'm conflating a little bit the idea of science with just the basic idea of truth, which seems to be under attack as well.
It is. The thing is that Americans hold scientists in really high esteem because they look at them as truth tellers, and they are, for the most part. Excuse me. And so it really gives our candidates an opportunity to distinguish themselves from, the career politicians that they're often running against, that have been proven oftentimes to be more interested in their own self-feeling or preservation than in speaking truth to power and being honest with their constituents. So one thing that we have kind of seen organically crop up on the campaign trails for a lot of these candidates is that I believe in science becomes almost like a rallying call. And it's almost more of a value statement than a statement of fact because of the environment that we're living under.
Yeah.
And, when you have a health secretary that goes in front of Congress and just lies and distorts, and everyone can see it, including the senators that he's testifying in front of. It really does make that contrast between, truth and non-truth.
Yeah. Well, what do we do about the fake science? I mean, during COVID, there were, people who were, doctors, saying, take a horse tranquilizer, you'll be fine. There were doctors that, the New York Times quoted during the measles outbreak recently, who said, yeah, I treat patients while I have measles. It's no problem. I mean, what do we do about the folks who have the credential but not the character?
Yeah, and I would imagine their licensing boards have something to say about that as well. You can always find people on the extreme that are outside of, who operate outside of known facts. And what's interesting, I think, with especially President Trump, this administration, is they like to point to someone who is completely outside the mainstream, but because they went to Harvard, that seems to convey some sort of legitimacy to their nonsense. And I think it's important that we call it out. It can be exhausting when you're dealing with an administration that just lies repeatedly, but it is very important. And, one of the things that really concerns me is where are we going with the flu vaccine? Right now there's a lot of attention being paid to the chaos that RFK Jr. has unleashed on COVID vaccines. But next year he's going to have an opportunity to oversee the next year's flu vaccine. And already people are concerned with, are they going to be able to get a flu vaccine this year? Another year of this is really terrifying because, in the United States, we lose anywhere from 6,000 to 40,000 Americans a year to influenza, and that's with a good flu vaccine. So I think this is not headed in a good direction, but I think we should also take RFK Jr. at his word when he said, maybe you shouldn't take medical advice from me. Right. And I think it's going to require people relying more on their own doctors and their local public health officials to get good health advice to keep them and their families safe and healthy.
I think that's so true, but it's so dangerous. And I just think about like the thing that made the biggest jump in life expectancy in human history, right, was, I think, sewage systems. That clean water was like the best thing we ever did. Suddenly people lived a whole lot longer. And that wasn't like, me and my doctor or me and my family. That was a collective effort of society to invest in an enormous public health measure. And public health is not less complicated today when we're fighting species that jump, viruses that jump from one species to the next, like COVID did. Really complicated stuff, and it helps to have a coordinated response. So if the federal government is not going to be able to figure out how to, I don't know, what strains of the flu, of the virus, of the annual influenza virus to put in a vaccine, a shot, well, people may get shots and they may not actually work finally. This is all enormously dangerous.
Oh, it absolutely is. I mean, public health is working best when you and I aren't thinking about it. And I would really like to go back to a time when the majority of Americans don't have to question whether our government is trying to keep us safe or not. A lot of this that we've talked about today has been focused on our domestic public health problems coming from this administration. But public health problems don't stop at our borders. And, the cuts that we have made to disease surveillance overseas and disease prevention is going to affect us here, without a doubt. And it's short-sighted and reckless. I mean, I remember during the second Bush administration, when we were building all these Ebola clinics, and I was thinking, why aren't we just building clinics so we don't have an Ebola outbreak? Right. We're just kind of wiping all that away.
And what about Florida's decision to eliminate the mandate for childhood vaccinations?
I mean, it's insane. I mean, when you look at the map of what the MMR, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine did for public health, it is tremendous. Millions of lives have been saved. And, for vaccines to work at their best, we need, anywhere 92-95% of the population vaccinated. There's some people who can't be vaccinated. There's some people that are immunocompromised, infants that can't, are too young to receive vaccines. And the idea that we're going to just unleash a free-for-all on public health is just reckless and ignorant. I am glad I don't have children in the Florida public schools, because they are going to be less healthy because of this policy.
Yeah, and I mean, parents, I guess we don't spend enough time explaining this. Even if you are vaccinated, if a big enough portion of the population you live in isn't, the vaccine you have may not protect you, because those other people create a reservoir for the virus. And that virus can then mutate and do all kinds of things. So it isn't just I'm choosing for me and my child. The decision impacts, again, the health of it's the equivalent in that water example I gave you of what if 30% of the population said, you know what, I'm not going to go sit on the toilet and flush there. I'm going to go out on my neighbor's house and just that's where I'm going to defecate. That everybody's less safe.
Oh, absolutely.
Pardon me for a gross example, but that's really what they're doing.
Well, but they're trying to frame it as a personal choice. And if we left everything to personal choice, we would have chaos. If is it your personal choice to get drunk and get behind a car and go speeding down the road the wrong way? No, we have laws against that. Is it your, personal choice to not have car insurance? No, we have laws that say you have to have car insurance to drive a car in most states. I mean, the idea that we don't put restrictions on personal choice when it comes to protecting our fellow people is absurd.
Yeah, it's cruel. It's cruel. It's dangerous. Yeah. It's a lie that it makes anybody freer. Yeah. Okay, so what if there are people listening who are aspiring scientists, doctors? I don't know. They work at the University of Chicago or at Northwestern here in Chicago, or they're listening and they're in some other city with a great university, and the administration has just closed their labs because they cut their grant. And now they're going, my gosh, I've dedicated my whole life to this field of science and it's gone. I have no place to do it. And they hear and they just decide, you know what, I actually want to go do something about that. How do they raise their hand for you and say, you know what, I might be interested in being a candidate?
Oh, well, and I say, please reach out. Our website is 314action.org. We have resources there, as well as our application to apply for an endorsement, or even if you're just in that beginning stage of trying to figure out your why on how to run. And I think I said this earlier, but I'm going to repeat it, is there's no issue that doesn't benefit from having scientists at the table making decisions, whether it's your water policy or thinking about public transportation systems or how to build more affordable housing. There are a lot of ways to get involved. And I know a lot of our national attention is focused on, the 535 members of the U.S. House and Senate, but there are over 500,000 elected positions across the country, and not all of them require you to take a leave of absence or to quit your job. Many local and even some state positions are meant to be served part-time, where you can continue to work, but also serve your community and help make things better. I mean, even an issue like climate change, think about how much you can get done at the local level that can start to make a difference and make a template for other communities to follow to help to address a really pressing issue that we need to get serious about.
That is such a good point. And on climate change, there are two things scientists can help us do. Scientific thinking can help. One is addressing climate change, but while this administration's in Washington, that's only going to get worse. But locally, we have to build resilience to the change that's coming. It isn't anymore, is there going to be climate change and will there be impacts? There are already impacts. We've seen it in the floods. We've seen it in the fires. We've seen it in the smoke in our air. We've seen it in this heavier storms. That's going to continue. And so if you have the capacity to help think about not just how we fight climate change, but how we adapt and survive some of the worst impacts that are clearly coming our way. We need you. We really need you. Oh my gosh, agriculture policy. We need you.
Well, and absolutely. And, we've actually done a pretty good job of helping to elect scientists, even in rural farming communities. Because you know what? Yep. Farmers don't farm based on witchcraft. They farm based on science and data. And they understand that not having proper weather forecasts is going to affect their crop yields, and they understand the importance of these issues. Never mind the tariffs. You don't have. We have seen scientists have their message resonate beyond just Democratic constituencies. That they are able to reach people that even ones that don't normally vote for a Democrat. And we need you. This is our moment.
Let me close with your own experience. You ran for office. I've run for office. It is a fabulous thing to do. Hard as it is, win or lose, you meet so many interesting people. You learn so much about yourself. I'm guessing, even though it didn't go the way you want, you don't regret doing it.
No, I don't. I mean, that's the talk I give to scientists is that, look, the basic math is most people who run are not going to win. Think about how many people run for president. Only one gets to be president. But you cannot deny that if you run a credible campaign and talk about issues that you're passionate about, that are important to your community and your neighbors, you can make a difference. And that's really, that's really important.
Yep, that's where America sees its future, in campaigns, in listening to people. It's still different than governing. It is where we talk about who we want to be. So important, so very important. Hey, I am sorry it's been 3 years since we last talked. I won't let that happen again. Thank you so much for your work.
I hope to speak with you soon. Thank you.
Yep, and the time. I really appreciate it. All right, everybody, 314 action. We're going to help raise the bar on these idiots who don't believe in science. Thank you, Chauncey. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. Your calls.
Edwin Eisendrath is taking your calls now at 773-763-9278. The Big Picture is on now. WCPT 820.
All right, Jim, kick us off.
Hi, Edwin. Yeah, this attempt to turn the United States into the Heritage Foundation, I don't think it's built to last. But anyway, tourism has gone about 3 million people, so that's going to crush the job numbers too, because nobody's going to be working at the hotels. You can't blame a European if we're not going to be vaccinated. and you've got to show your papers everywhere you go. All I know is that I went to Europe, I keep my passport and papers in the safe because I was afraid if I did get pickpocketed or lost them, if I was drinking or something, I'd be screwed. You know what I mean? But I imagine here you couldn't walk the streets here because you wouldn't be safe. You know, especially when you look a little foreign to ice. So they'd stop you, and you have to have loaded with papers on you. And I mean, it's just this is not built to last. Edwin. This is temporary insanity. That's if you're pleading this in the United States in courts, you have to plead temporary insanity, and it just can't continue this way. I mean, everybody's being attacked: universities, television stations, anybody who tries to, use our First Amendment right of free speech, it'll be attacked. And it can't go on like this. I know the Republicans are having a field day with it, and they're all for it. But we'll get that's what they're trying to get the revenge on the Republican Party, our party, the Democratic Party. But revenge is not going to work. This isn't going to work, Edwin. It just can't work. That's all I can say. You have a great week. Have a great week, buddy. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, it can't work. Well, it shouldn't. I mean, there are places all over the world where people live in fascist autocracies. It's terrible. We've enjoyed a lot of freedom. But you started that conversation by talking about the impact on the economy, and I haven't had that conversation yet today. And maybe as more callers come in, we can talk about the absolutely terrible jobs report that we just had, and what Trump is actually doing to our economy. Like he's doing everything else he touches turns to crap. Dave, what do you think?
Hey, Edwin. Yeah, I just seen an article here where it says the Trump administration has informed local officials that its promised immigration enforcement surge in Chicago will operate 7 days a week for about 6 weeks, according to the mayor of a suburb that houses an immigration processing center. Mayor Katrina Thompson said in a letter to the village's roughly 8,000 residents this week that the Trump administration told Broadview officials that a 2-story building used to temporarily hold immigrants before they're detained or deported will serve as a primary processing location for the expected operation.
Yep. Well, so let's think about it. It's not about crime, not about making us safe. It is about militarizing our streets in order to demonize immigrants and to no one, again, if there are any real criminals, feel free to take them off our streets. But that's not what this is. You don't need to send in these forces to do that job. And, Donald Trump's, he's just so incompetent. This is hard to believe, but his immigration deportation numbers are less than Joe Biden's at this point. Can you imagine that? And for all this yelling and screaming, he's incompetent and cruel and thuggish, and his solutions are stupid. He knows one thing. Let's use force. Let's use force. Oh, here, fix schools. Let's use force. There's a boat that might have some drugs on it. Let's blow it up in the water. We are breaking the law. We are becoming, war criminals ourselves by doing behavior like this. But that's all he knows. There's force, he can use it. And this thuggish threat to just Chicago, you're going to know why we call it the War Department. You're not going to war with Chicago. Wars have all kinds of adverse consequences. In a real war, a high-rise that says Trump on it might not survive a real war, right? That's not what he wants. He's not looking for that. He's just being a thug. But he's trying to get us to make mistakes. He's trying to get the people of the city, like he tried to get the people of L.A., and in some extent he did, to attack the police, to attack ICE, so he can then have an excuse to send in more coercive power. And I hope we don't give him that excuse. I hope that all of us, stand there, photograph them, shout them down, tell them that they don't belong here, but we do it peacefully.
Yeah. Hey, Edwin, and then I'll close out with this one. Last night I let Dan and Paul know this other story I read where D.C. National Guard troops have orders extended through December. And Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp is sending 316 members of the Georgia National Guard to Washington, D.C. later this month. A sign, I guess, Trump's law enforcement operation in the nation's capital is going to drag on a bit more.
Well, you know what? I'm going to do this with any National Guard troops I see in Chicago that are coming from other states, and I hope that Brian Kemp gets the same from the ones in D.C. Go up to these young men and women and just say, how does it feel to be taken away from your job? These are part-time jobs. Your job and your home and your family, and being sent up here to pick up the garbage in my city? Is that really what you signed up for? And just make sure that they are furious with their own governors for the deployment they have been sent on. Right? It's not their fault. Yeah.
No, they've been, a lot more, with, more than they bargained for. Because, even when you look back about a year and a half ago, they've been sending them over to Jordan and stuff with that Tower 22. And at them were all National Guard. It's because the active duty was low. So these guys are, fill it up. But anyway, I just thought you might like those tidbits of info. So
thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Edwin. Talk to you again someday. Bye.
You bet. All right, Dan, you're next.
Hey, Edwin, how are you, sir?
Thank you. Good.
I would just like to say that, and I've mentioned this before, where is the end point? Where is the line that we draw as far as this is the end of this? There has to be an end to this, Edwin, as you well know. And either that or we have nothing left. There's no country left. I'm just wondering, when do we decide as a people that this is enough? And I'm not talking about protests. I'm talking about when do we decide that this is enough and decide that this has to stop?
There are two questions in your question, because when does it stop and how does it stop aren't the same question. And Dan, I believe we have passed that line. And if you look at the polling across the country, Donald Trump's disapproval rating is at record high. His approval rating is at record low. Americans do not like this. We have said enough. Do not continue. But what do we do about it is not the same question, because overthrowing a government by force is not what you and I want to do. The opportunity for kicking them out begins in the next round. Well, it begins in the special elections that are coming up, and there are a couple in September, and it begins, it's a big chance in the elections that are coming up next year. That's when we throw them out, because they will continue, this bunch, to do things that we think are already have crossed the line. And they will continue to do it as long as they have the power to do it. So it ends when we throw them out of office.
Well, I agree. I understand that 100%. But the way I also understand it is, how do we have honest elections, even in the midterms? I mean, I don't see how this is possible anymore.
Well, I do. And we talked a lot about that with one of my earlier guests. Elections he will try and interfere. He's trying with his executive orders. He's trying to federalize elections. And some states are going along with them. Many aren't. But elections are still a local affair. They're still widely transparent. And we should trust in look, you and I none of us have said Donald Trump cheated and didn't win the last election. America did vote for him. I don't think those results are cheating. I think that, unfortunately, we made a huge mistake, this country.
They absolutely were cheating. It shows it in study after study in the 7 swing states how it was.
Well, they were certainly suppressing the vote for sure, but they weren't miscounting the vote. The people who voted, this is the decision they made. We need to get everybody out to vote, and that's going to be hard, but we have to redouble our efforts for sure. Anyway, Dan, thank you. It's a good
thank
question.
you, Edwin.
Yep.
Have a good day. Thank you.
Ron, you're next.
Hello. Yes. Yes. I just want to ask you if you heard about the Navy SEAL operation to go into North Korea and plant microphones. Did you hear about that one?
I did. I read about it. This is something that happened in Trump's first term, and he kept it. It was a failed operation, dangerous operation that could have caused problems in North Korea. But he kept it a secret, and he didn't even tell the leaders, the 4 leaders of the legislature, who he, by law, is supposed to tell these things to, because presidents do not get to act unilaterally like that. So, lawless. By the way, let's take a minute on North Korea. I mean, remember, cast your mind back to Trump 1. He threatened nuclear war. He said he went to the United Nations and he said he would wipe North Korea off the map. They cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. And then he went to North Korea and became Kim Jong-un's buddy. And North Korea now has nuclear weapons, courtesy of Donald Trump. He failed, right? He said that could never happen, and it happened on his watch. And I just, I expect... I worry that we will lose Ukraine and Europe will once again be divided as it was during the Cold War, and that millions of people in Europe will live under tyranny again because that will do whatever Putin wants and will not stand up for the people of Ukraine fighting for their independence. I worry about the slaughter in Gaza, which must not continue, but he doesn't care. He wants a golf course there.
Right.
This is an incompetent, dangerous man. So, yes, I heard about North Korea, and shame on him.
Yeah, when he was asked about it, he said, I don't know anything about it. Like he doesn't know anything. Like he's saying the military does anything they want to without his approval.
I don't know why anybody asks him anything. I mean, that's a different question. Reporters shouldn't ask him anything. They shouldn't report on anything he says. If his mouth is moving, he's lying. We've learned that all this time. Just don't ask. Look at what he does. Look at the facts, and not what this madman says. Look at the facts. Yeah,
right.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
All right, thank you.
You bet. All right, Naomi, you're next.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Hello,
Where are you calling
Edwin?
from, Naomi?
Hi. Santa Monica, California.
Beautiful place.
I know it. I love your station.
Thank you.
So I have several things to say, and I don't know how you want me to do it. Should I just say one thing and see what you want to, how you respond, or just should I go through them, my ideas or my thoughts?
How big's your list? I got to see if I can remember it. If it's 3, I'll remember.
It's a little big, but it's several things, but it wouldn't take long.
All right, let's go.
Okay. So the first thing is on the vote count, there are irregularities. They have found this group. I don't have my notes. I'll find them and I'll call you back next week. There are irregularities in the ballot counting. In the mail-in ballots for Democrats and independents, they have found irregularities. And the people that are doing it cannot get the Democratic Party to get involved. Not yet. They're trying to encourage them, kind of trying to get them to get involved in it. The other thing, do you know what's going on with Kilmar Abrego?
Sure, but talk about that.
Yeah, but do you know why? He has been told by the Department of Justice that if he would agree to lie and say that he is the criminal they say he is, or that he was doing something with the immigrants, whatever, moving the immigrants around, that then they would let him go to Costa Rica where his family could go. And if he didn't agree, then they would move him to Uganda. So they're threatening him. And his lawyers know this. And did you know that they were threatening him like that? God.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. The other thing is I don't understand. It just occurred to me on all of the lawsuits that this that this guy filed, I don't understand why he hasn't been sued for his litigious, frivolous lawsuits.
Well, some of his suits have been thrown. A lot of his suits have been thrown out. So.
No, he needs to be sanctioned. He needs to be sanctioned. Yeah. Okay. He needs to get pounded with that. Anyway, the other thing is, to me, the most interesting thing is I would like to figure out a way to divert our tax money so that we keep that in our states, the blue states. If we could develop some kind of software and spread it around the blue states, and once we've developed it, then we can, set it up and get it going. And then all of a sudden, their funds are depleted. All the money that they're counting on stealing from us won't be there. Anyway, that's just my idea. I think it can be done because we collect state taxes in California. I know Illinois has state tax too, right? Anyway, the only thing is I think the business, the employers would have to agree to this somehow. I'm not sure how it would work, but it would be great if we could do that, wouldn't it, Edwin? Huh? Don't you think?
Well, let me go through your whole list. Is that your list?
Well, I have some other things, but I'm going to just stop there.
All right. So I don't know about the voting irregularities you talk about. I'll wait till you come up with the evidence. I have not heard that. I've heard.
Yeah, it started. Yeah, they found the.
Let's just source that and see what that is. I can't answer that. On Kilmar Abrego Garcia, you bet what they're doing to him is what they did to Mayor Eric Adams in New York. They said, we will make your prosecution go away. We want you, but we want some things from you. Hey, buddy, I could cut off your foot. Or you could leave the county, but, the choice is yours. That's what they're doing. It's mobster behavior. It's absolutely appalling. And the judge in the Abrego Garcia case, the judges know this, and they are pushing back against Department of Justice lawyers on this.
The DOJ lawyers need to lose their licenses because they're practicing illegally.
Of course. There's a lot of they have shamed the profession of law. Sanctions for frivolous lawsuits. The slow, tough thing to do, but he's being thrown out of court, and Trump is losing most of the cases. And remember, he was also convicted of 34 felonies. I mean, he is not winning in court. He is a crook, and he's an abuser. I agree with you. He's a serial abuser of the system.
But the thing about that is he's been doing this. He does the same tactic with the contractors that he didn't pay. He just pounds them until they go broke.
Right, but they have to. The sanctions have to go to the lawyers. That's how it works. You sanction the lawyers for frivolous lawsuits, not their clients. And as for withholding taxes from the federal government, I actually don't think that's a great idea. Too complicated, and I want us to be one country. I do. I mean, the federal government is going to have trouble operating anyway. They're going to have a tough time coming up with a continuing resolution, and they're never going to pass the 9 additional budget bills they have yet to pass, before the deadline. So let's see what happens in this negotiation. But I don't want us, each state, saying, it's optional whether I participate in this country. We did that in the 1860s, and I really don't want to go down that road again. I don't like where the country's going. I can't stand what this president is doing. But I am not ready to say the experiment that Lincoln and so many patriots fought so hard to keep afloat is over. And if we all just say, you know what, Illinois, you keep your money, California, you keep your money, then it's over. I'm not ready to go there.
No, they're not going to say it. We're going to tell them. We're not going to ask them.
Yeah,
we're in a civil war. Anyway, I'll look for the information on the voting thing, on the voting irregularities, and I'll call you next week. Okay.
Thank you, Naomi. Appreciate it. Okay, Roosevelt.
Double E, thank you for taking my call. I'm going to be super quick, or try to be super quick. So I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question. Which is the worst state in the United States, Texas or Florida? Florida. I just sent you, I don't know if you read it. the Surgeon General. They're no longer going to get vaccines. That state is nuts. But let's go back to Texas. Did you see what Abbott did this week with I believe, what was it? The bounties that they got on women that are taking contraceptives, something to that effect. I read something.
Yeah, he believes in bounty hunters. Yeah.
Yeah. So which one's the worst, Double E?
Well, they're both appalling. They're both appalling, but Florida's worse. Florida's worse.
That's what I figured, because, you got all those kids, and then, it's ridiculous what these guys are doing. Now, let me jump into another subject real quick. The stuff that's going on in the state of New York with the conspiracy between Trump, Cuomo, and Adams. How about that, huh? They're trying to fix the elections to conspire against that young man that's running just because he's Muslim and because he was born in another country. Go ahead.
You know what? It's wrong for so many reasons. I worked a good chunk of my life in Saudi Arabia, and I had the privilege of spending some time at the U.S. Embassy there, not as a worker there, but as an American doing business there. And the people in that embassy are professional, and they work hard, and the ambassador is an important position. And the idea that you pluck ethically challenged, mayor who you've strong-armed out of a race and say, we'll make you the ambassador. So on top of everything else, it's a reflection of how little this government cares about the rest of the world, or cares about how Americans interact with the rest of the world. He would be a disgrace as a. Remember, this is a guy who was going on trial for taking Turkish bribes. Right. And you're going to say, like, OK, we're going to give you as an ambassador a guy who's, familiar with taking bribes. Like, seriously? It's just so disgusting. And of course, as you point out, what it says about the mayor's race and how they want to work, and the fact that it wasn't denounced, immediately and thoroughly by Andrew Cuomo and by everybody else. It's despicable.
And by the way, Double E, you had a fantastic interview with Chuy Garcia.
Wasn't that fun? Thank you.
It was a lot of fun. That was very, very informative and very detailed as far as what the different topics that you chose and the questions that you asked him.
He's an old friend. We served in the city council together years and years and years ago. So we've been friends for a long time. Yep.
I noticed the camaraderie with you and him. But, it's awful the way this country, the way it's going with this war, Department of War, and these knuckleheads that they have these meetings where they constantly bathe them in sweet words. I'm talking about Trump. And that's all it is. It's all a show. It's all it's The Apprentice all over again. As a matter of fact,
I wish that were true. Like. I know, and it's a show, and it's a distraction from the Epstein files, which are very dangerous for Donald Trump. But it also is real and hurtful to people. I mean, no vaccines in Florida means kids are going to die. You know what? These ICE raids in Chicago means innocent people are going to get rounded up without their rights protected and shipped off to God knows where, because that's what these people do, and heaven forbid they incite violence and then people will get shot. So it's all for show, but it has real consequences in people's lives, real consequences. Yeah.
I'm going to end it with this, Double E. The word is cruelty.
I agree with you.
Thank you.
I agree with you. You bet. All right, Dave, we have 1.5 minutes. I'm giving them to you.
Edwin? Yeah, I was just thanks, Edwin. Yeah, I was just going to raise, I remember a few years ago with the Black Lives Matter issue when it was strong in the streets, the Chicago found out, if I remember right, they had spent $60 million on bad cops. And there were only about 5 or 6 of them, but they had caused so many lawsuits individually that Chicago had to pay out like $60 million. Now we've got Trump and he's bringing in inexperienced people to pretend to be cops. And he's just walking Chicago into more lawsuits. And so for Trump to pretend, for him to pretend to be a conservative, a real conservative is slow and steady, and you don't make expensive mistakes like the previous caller was talking about the willful negligence in what do you call it? Oh, God, there's an expression for people that abuse the courts. A willful
serial
abuse of the courts.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I agree with her. She's dead on right about that. And he was sued 5,300 times because he would never pay anybody off. And now he's walking America into all of these lawsuits along those lines. So I think this gives us a nice opportunity to talk about Trump as a fake conservative, and that he doesn't believe in the rule of law. So walking Chicago into more bad lawsuits.
Well, it's got to be our last word. Chicago won't get sued for his errors, but the federal government might. But we have before we get to the litigation, everybody out there, stay safe, stay smart, stay cool. Don't engage in violence with these people. Take pictures, stay aware, stay alert, watch out for each other. Let's show them what this city is made of. All right, everybody, I'll talk to you next week. You take care.